Can you guys see? Let me scooch this down.
Yep.
You can both see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So, as you both, I believe, know, the purpose of this time together is that I'll be sharing some of the mindful improv strategies that I've been teaching in corporate settings for brave conversations. And today my goal is to specifically share them for application within the church. I know that Kathy knows me, so I'll briefly introduce myself in a minute, but I firstly wanted to just start us off with a passage of scripture and then a quick prayer. So the scripture that I chose is Ephesians 4:25-26. And it says, "So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger." And I love that so much because it's so deeply in alignment with the spirit of mindful improv thinking when it comes to brave conversations, this acceptance of anger. There does not need to be any erasure of anybody's feelings or anybody's experiences. We can have anger, and we can be implored as believers not to be sinful, not to tear each other down, and to look for a loving way of navigating a path forward, not a path of avoidance, a path forward. We can have both things. The other thing that I have found to be so impactful about that is this idea of putting away all falsehood. And when I was growing up, I always interpreted that as like, if you're the one that broke the vase, be honest about it. Like if you're the one that mom's about to be mad at, just tell the truth. But as an adult, I don't really connect with the idea of honesty in that same way, But where I find myself being tempted to bring falsehood, to live in falsehood, is when I feel like my truth is unacceptable, or like if I really am who I am in front of someone and I be honest about how I'm feeling or what my experience is, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to cause any problems or something like that. And so it's easy to not be truthful. It's easy to not say that I'm angry when I am, or say that I'm hurt when I am, or to pretend like I agree when I don't agree. Those are sort of temptations that I've felt in the past. And I used to think that that was in the name of peace, that I'm keeping the peace by just keeping quiet. And now more than ever, I am convinced that it does not have to be that way. And that in fact, that is not real peace. That is not real unity if people are being asked to just not be who they really are in order to belong. And as I've prepared for the Brave Church program and spoken with a bunch of different pastors, it seems like there's a consensus that that's not what we want in the body of Christ. That's not the vision that we want to hold of what church can be. And so the path is brave conversations. This is how we can live in our truth. This is how we can be truthful with one another and have our feelings and have our experiences and honor one another as fellow members of the body. And so that is just deeply my prayer for this program and for our time together. And so if it's okay with you guys, we'll just open with a quick word of prayer and then we'll move on. God, thank you so much for both of the people who are in attendance at this webinar and for the people who will watch the recording later, and for the people who were here on Tuesday. God, I just lift up each of their ministries individually, the bodies of worship where they spend time, and outside of the church, their ministry as believers and people who are putting love and shining your light into the world. God, I just pray for strength and wisdom and patience in the frustrating and taxing work that can be peace building. So God, I just lift them to you and thank you so much for their presence here. I also lift myself to you and this next hour to you. And I pray that you will guide my words and that this will not be about me, but will be about just sharing your, whatever it is that you need to say to us, whatever it is that you have for us in this work. I pray that that will be revealed and that I will be humble to as the way that you steer this conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this work. Amen. Okay, so a little bit about me. I know Kathy knows me, but I think, Paul, that you and I are new to each other, is my understanding at least. So my name is Andrea Flack-Wetherald, and I have a degree in social work from Bluffton University. And the first few years out of college, that's what I was doing, working in a primary social work setting. I've had the opportunity to work in refugee resettlement and also work with veterans who were vulnerable. And the work that I did at the VA has also deeply shaped the work that I do now and the way that I teach brave conversations, especially to leaders. There are skills that it's called motivational interviewing. And there's one of the 5 weeks of Brave Church is dedicated to teaching that in particular, because I think when you are a leader, I wish every leader was equipped with these skills. It's not appropriate necessarily for everyone. You have to be in some sort of position of authority in order to effectively use motivational interviewing. But I was introduced to these skills as a social worker whose job it was to walk with veterans through the process of smoking cessation. So the research study that I worked on was centered around addiction and was centered around, how do we come alongside people who are trying to make a change in their lives and really support their effort, not come at them with lecturing and ultimatums and this sort of thing, but how do we help them tap into their own internal motivation to make this change? And so motivational interviewing is just that. It's how do we ask questions designed to help somebody find their own motivation and their own solutions. It's not lecturing. It's asking questions designed to cultivate more change talk, it's called. It's so powerful. It's mostly used in a clinical setting. So it's often used, in hospitals and this sort of thing. But I have found with some minor tweaking that it can be very, very helpful. I've taught this to HR people and leaders in the corporate world. And I just wish for every pastor and church leader to have these skills, again, to maybe need to tweak in some ways. But it's deeply, deeply helpful for what I used to call compassionate accountability and now call using compassion with accountability, because it turns out those words are trademarked by another Mennonite. How about that? So the work that I did as a social worker, I still feel like a social worker, just in a totally different setting than I originally imagined when I got that degree. So you'll hear notes of that in today's webinar and in the Brave Church program if you decide to move forward with that. I'm also an improviser, which is something that surprised everybody in my life, myself included. I took a left turn out of a job where I had retirement benefits and the whole shebang to produce and perform comedy in Pittsburgh and in New York City. And I did that right up until the pandemic. And I just performed for my first time after the pandemic last Friday, which was super fun. So I'll share more about why improv is so meaningful here in a little bit, but maybe just to be sure, I know Kathy is familiar, but Paul, are you familiar with improv at all? Have you maybe been to an improv show or, okay.
Yes.
That's great. I'm going to hit the escape button because we have someone in the waiting room.
Okay. Escape button.
I know. You think, guys, I need to be more tech savvy than I am. Here we go.
You had to get out of this.
I had to get out of the whole thing. Okay. And now I'll go back in. Share. Play. Great. Okay. Hi, Josh. Good to see you. Okay. So I'm also an improviser, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. I'm the author of a book called The Funny Thing About Forgiveness, What Every Leader Needs to Know About Improv, Culture, and the World's Least Favorite F Word. And so you'll note that forgiveness is sort of at the core of the way I teach brave conversations. I know it might sound a little bit backwards, but I don't think I know that we set ourselves up for success in having these brave conversations when we forgive first. That way we enter the conversation and we don't need to choke the life out of it in order to get our own healing, our own closure, our own emotional freedom. And so one of the weeks of Brave Church is dedicated specifically to learning what I call the proactive forgiveness process. I think that forgiveness doesn't have to be this abstract, emotional thing. I think we can choose it for ourselves. And so the way that I teach it is deeply rooted in the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, which is also something that I learned as a social worker, and learning what is happening in our brains when we try to change and how do we identify where we're at in that process and move just to that next bucket. It's not always a race to the finish line. It's just progress, And so I've adapted that model for thinking about forgiveness as well, because it tees us up for success in our brave conversations. I'm a brave conversation coach. This is where I've decided to focus my work at this point. Is I believe that we build peace one restored relationship at a time. And I believe that we restore relationships through brave conversations. And so that has become the central focus of my professional work. And the model that I use for all of this is called Mindful Improv Thinking, which is a combination of mindfulness practice and improvised comedy. So firstly, I think it's good to just all be on the same page, because it used to be the case when I first started talking about this, that some people hadn't really heard the word mindfulness. That is not the case anymore. I feel like that word is everywhere now. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what I mean when I say that, mindfulness is the ability to be fully present in this moment and aware of your thoughts, feelings, and surroundings without judging them. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes this gets paired with different meditation exercises, and that's fine. There's lots of different ways to do it. But ultimately, when we say mindfulness, we're talking about being mindful of what's really happening for ourselves. And the second bullet point here is the reason why this is so helpful for brave conversations, because this is what helps us to notice, how am I really feeling right now? What's really happening for me? So often we think that what's happening is that we're angry. That's that first powerful feeling. It feels stronger than embarrassment. It feels stronger than, oops, I think I got this wrong. Defensiveness, those feelings are softer. Those feelings are a little bit harder to notice, but your brain is a supercomputer and it can solve that problem. Sometimes it just needs 30 seconds of silence and true inquisition, true brave questioning. What do I really feel right now? What's happening for me? And so we're going to practice just real quick. We're just going to take 30 seconds of silence and just notice for yourself, how am I feeling right now? What's here? What's here for me? So here we go. Sometimes that's all it takes. One of the things that I teach about brave conversations, and confrontation is the word that I have gotten a lot more comfortable using, is that it's an opportunity, not an obligation. If we're feeling obligated, we're not ready. We're not ready. The thing with leaders is that sometimes it's your responsibility. And it's easy to get twisted around about the difference between being responsible and being obligated. But there is a difference between those two things. And sometimes the difference is that 30 seconds of silence. And you can find alignment for yourself, and you can find that sense of renewed optimism, renewed confidence. Sometimes it just takes that 30-second investment of, how do I really feel right now? Is it really true that I'm convinced I have an enemy? Or is it possible that I'm feeling hurt because this reactivated the time that someone else was absolutely nasty to me and they held the same perspective on this one issue or something? Sometimes it truly is just that personal curiosity about ourselves. What's happening for me here? And so I deeply believe in the power of mindfulness to equip us beautifully for brave conversations. Next is, what is improv? So ultimately, it's a form of live comedy where everything is made up. And I always encourage people to think more of what you would have seen on Whose Line Is It Anyway versus Saturday Night Live. Sometimes people get those things mixed up, which is okay. It's all live comedy, but improv is completely made up on the spot. And really what's happening there is a practice of building collaboratively through acceptance and vulnerability. That's really what it is. It's building collaboratively using a process that is completely about acceptance and vulnerability. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but that's also what life is. That's like our only option. There is not a playbook. And sometimes people are deeply invested in making us believe that there is a playbook, making us believe that they are in control, that they're, the creative director and we have to answer them and we have to do it their way and whatever. But the deep truth is that this thing is all made up. And we do not have to read from a script that is not working. And that I just have really come to love shaking up HR departments with that idea. If the script is not working, don't use it. Fine, there's a different path and you get to decide what that is. You get to, they say in improv, the answer is in your scene partner's eyes. And it's so gorgeous that sometimes makes me cry when I think about that. Like the answer is in your scene partner's eyes. Our job as improvisers is not to impress the audience. It's to honor our scene partners. And so it's this ask of like, can you get present in this moment and just ask yourself, what is needed right now? What's needed right now? Not what did I plan on saying, not what did I write down on my bullet list, the things I wanted to cover in our brave conversation. None of that. What is needed right now? What's needed right now? And you can find a path forward that would not otherwise exist. When we bring a script, we are limiting what can happen in this conversation. When we open ourselves up to just truly trusting the process, believing that you'll have the words you need when you're in alignment, when you're just listening. Do you trust that you are capable of listening? Do you trust that your brain is capable of thinking of a new thing to say if the thing you planned on saying no longer makes sense? I trust that. I believe that about you. I believe that you guys are all gorgeously capable improvisers. So the same exact skills that make improv successful on stage make people successful off stage too. The first time I thought of these words, I was like, that sounds so great. I'm going to put that on a business card. And now I'm like, it's so much bigger than that to me because I'm maybe like 5 years into teaching this work off of like out of comedy settings. And I have just seen this be true over and over and over and over. Like it is true for people who are lawyers. It is true for people who are foster parents. It is true for people whose job it is to put their lives on the line every weekend and do violence prevention work in some of, I hate to call any neighborhood dangerous. So I'm going to find different words because I'm an improviser and I'm capable of doing that. Neighborhoods where people sometimes feel unsafe and where things go down. And so this is where they need to be on the weekends to try and help people be the best of who they can be. I had the opportunity to train all of the city of Pittsburgh's violence prevention workers that are a part of their HVIP. There's plenty of people who volunteer to do this, so I shouldn't say every person, but anyhow, teach them these same skills. And guess what? Life is improv. Life is improv everywhere. It's improv for HR people. It's improv for bankers. It's improv for software engineers. Like that's just the whole truth. And so when we learn what is it that Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles and Wayne Brady, these people that we've seen create magic in front of our eyes and come up with things that you're like, how did they do that? Well, I'm about to tell you how they did that. And those same skills will help you when you find yourself in brave conversations and you find yourself maybe surprised. Maybe you didn't always have the benefit of planning, and someone has just come up to you and given you feedback that feels stingy, or a situation is just unfolding in front of you. These same skills will help you in those moments to stand in your integrity, to honor your boundaries, to honor what you believe in, and to honor your scene partner. Okay, so let's get started. The basis of all improv skills is this concept of yes and. And I have found it to be true that most often people have heard these words from somewhere. They've heard this idea of yes and. And I've also been teaching these ideas in non-comedy settings long enough to know that they can almost sound trivial, because especially people who are social justice minded hear these words and they're like, but hey, we don't say yes to everything. We don't say yes to sexism. We don't say yes to racism. Of course. And that's also not what's happening on stage either. If we said yes to everything, it would be mayhem and chaos. Truly what's happening is this deeper thing that if you were to take an improv class, you would feel that a deeper thing is happening. So ultimately what we're talking about, and for our purposes today, I want you to interpret these words as equal parts humility and courage. That's what's really happening. Equal parts humility and courage. That's what's happening on stage. This belief that the next right thing can come from anywhere. It can come from a moment we didn't really like. It can come from a quote unquote mistake, a bottle breaking in the audience, smoke detectors going off because someone brought a fog machine or whatever. Like weird stuff happens in an improv show. So we can decide to be humble and to not need to be in control and to accept like, oh, this happened and this can be the next right thing for our scene. It doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Off stage in a brave conversation, humility looks like, you know what? You can vote for someone that I didn't vote for and still have something valuable to contribute to the conversation. Off stage, it looks like you can have absolutely gotten it wrong. You can have shown me correctly that you have areas where you need to grow. And it's maybe not even a matter of opinion. Sometimes it's not a matter of opinion. You absolutely cannot hit children. There are things that you just cannot do. And this idea of mindful improv thinking for brave conversations is not about erasing that truth. There is no erasure involved in acceptance. In fact, it's the opposite. In fact, it's about yes and is about accepting what is and not ignoring. It's about realizing that, we can't just avoid what doesn't work for us. We can't just ignore what we didn't like and try to just like be good enough that what already happened won't matter. We can't just try to pile on so much icing that it doesn't matter that we're putting frosting on a turd. Like there has to be acceptance of what is. That's what we're talking about when we say yes and. It's the humility to believe that what exists is enough. It is safe to accept what exists. And it's also the courage to add your own thing. Also, we have another person joining us. Welcome to Teresa. Is everybody impressed? Because I just now figured out how to do that without stopping the screen share. So I feel like, I don't know if anyone brought a trophy for me, but
Thumbs up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So it's about this balance of humility and courage, because at some point, it's easy to think, especially I'm seeing, white faces on this call. And I know what it feels like as a white person to sometimes think, I don't want to make it worse. I don't know what to say. I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to make it worse. Maybe it's better if I just don't participate, Guys, at some point, we have to summon the courage to get involved in the story and get involved in the conversation. Otherwise, we might as well be in the audience, right? Improv is equal parts listening and building. It's the yes, but it's also the and. Humility, courage, listen, build, listen, build. In addition to being a completely gorgeous philosophy for life and building healthy relationships, this is also like, that's macro level, what this does for us. Macro level, this is like a world-changing way to walk through the earth. But micro level, this is also how we build a brave conversation. When we're using mindful improv thinking, this is what we're specifically doing inside that conversation, where instead of reading off of a bullet list, in my world as a brave conversation coach, I have heard many times people saying, this is what I wrote for my conversation. Can I read it to you? And I'm like, yeah, it'd be better for you to read it to me than to read it to this person. Like, let's talk it through. Because ultimately my goal is not for anyone to do it my way. My goal is for you to trust you as an improviser, for you to deeply trust that who you are is good enough. Who you are is good enough. You can trust your instincts. You can trust your ability to listen in the moment, to hear your scene partner, and to have the next right thing to say. You can trust yourself to listen and build, listen and build, listen and build. And so I encourage people to let go of the scripts. I encourage people to, even if the reason they're doing it, they do it for the best of intentions, right? The best of intentions cause people to try to write out everything they want to say beforehand, or make like a bullet list of everything that they want to say. It's good intentions. It's the desire to make sure they've been clear, to make sure they don't accidentally back down from saying the brave thing they need to say. And I totally get that. And life is improv. Life is improv. So improv skills are what is going to serve you best in that moment. It's going to help you find a path forward for your scene partner, with your scene partner. I meant to say with your scene partner. Okay. So humility, courage. So one of the things I wanted to do that I didn't do on Tuesday, which is why I will use this recording when I send it out to our lovely West Coast friends, we're going to do an actual exercise. So before brave conversations, one of the mindful improv exercises that I encourage people to use is to incorporate that mindfulness piece of truly figuring out, like, how am I feeling? What's really going on for me? Don't try to strong arm yourself into compassion, right? Don't try to force yourself to see it the way this person sees it. You can't. You don't even know, like, really why they believe what they believe or what they've been through. It's just not possible. So that's kind of wasted energy when you try to think, well, why might this person have said this? What might be the reason? Ultimately, what we end up doing, again, for the best of intentions, it's no one is trying to caricaturize and dehumanize anyone, but that's ultimately what we end up accidentally doing when we ask ourselves, whoops, sorry. All right. I hope, Teresa, that you're able to connect now. I'm sorry that you had some connection issues. But when we try to imagine where someone else is coming from without asking them those brave questions and just hearing from them why they believe what they believe or when they started believing something, what ultimately happens is that we start building a whole picture in our heads of what kind of person this must be, and our brain can't help it. We've only seen what we've seen. We've only seen a sliver of who this person is. So every bit of extrapolating that we do is just our imagination creating more of our pre-existing biases about this person. Do you know what I mean? And we don't do it on purpose. But so what's most important to do, a better use of our energy before we enter the brave conversation, is to just notice when we're doing that and interrupt that. Interrupt it with curiosity instead. I'm starting to tell myself that I know what quote unquote kind of person I'm dealing with here. Or I'm starting to spend a lot of time imagining what I think this person thinks about me, for example. So notice when that's happening and interrupt it with this exercise instead. So here's what I've done. On a piece of paper, I've drawn a line down the middle and I've written yes on one side and on the other. Okay. Yes on one side and on the other. So your job is, for the yes part, this is where you're just writing out what is true. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm feeling defensive. Yes, I don't like this person. These things, it's sometimes hard for us to even commit to paper. You're never going to share this with me or anyone else. This is for you. So be honest. Don't try to make it nicey. Be honest. That's what's going to be really helpful. How are you really feeling? And one of the things that I love about making yourself write it is that you can't write as fast as you can think. So writing really forces you to slow down. It forces you to slow down and really think about, like, how do I feel? Is it true that I'm angry, or is it true that I feel sad? Is it maybe really the truth that because this person is, in my family, or because I've gone to church with this person for so long, I like them and I wish we believed the same thing about this, and we don't. And I just feel sad about that. Is it, I feel scared. I feel, whatever it is. I don't mean to, I feel like I'm belaboring the point, but be honest. Whatever it is that you feel, however you feel, and whatever is true about the situation, it is true that this person said something racist, or it is true that this person did or said something that just cannot happen in our church. Like I said, like, there are some things that it's not a matter of opinion. Children need to be safe in church. That is one thing that was brought up. Some people sent me questions before this webinar. And one of the things that somebody brought up was about abuse in the church reckoning with that abuse has happened, and the brave conversations that are now happening, about this and about rectifying this and making sure that it doesn't happen again. There are just things that cannot happen. It's not always a matter of opinion. And so in the yes column, you just take some time to write out what is really true. What do you know for sure? And what you need to challenge yourself on is anytime you start to write things that are not knowable. It's not knowable to you if this person is a racist. It is knowable to you that they said something that is racist. It is not knowable to you that this person is a racist. We are all more than the worst thing about us. It is entirely possible for us to do something that is hurtful and for it to be true that the thing that we did is hurtful, without that one thing erasing the whole of our identity, right? We have a bad habit in our culture of seeing bad behavior and then thinking things like, oh, the truth comes out. Now we see your true colors. Well, I tell you what, I really hope that the truth of who I am is not me at my worst. I hope that the truth about who I am as a woman of faith and as a mother is not who I am before I'm caffeinated and when my daughter's having a tantrum. Like, I really hope that I am allowed to be better than who I am in those moments. So that's the challenge. Yes column, we only write what we know is true. And then, and here's what's so gorgeous. In the and column, we can write what is deep truth, what we know is still possible anyway. Yes, I am angry, and I am capable of choosing curiosity. And we are all more than the worst thing about us. And I am capable of saying something that's awkward and hard to say. Sometimes what I need to put in my yes column is, yep, I'm feeling insecure about this conversation because I've gotten it wrong before. I'm feeling insecure because I know what it feels like to walk away from the table without really saying the thing that I needed to say. Yep, that's true. And good thing I get to choose again. Good thing it's all improv and I get to build whatever is going to happen next, like good thing I get to make a new choice. So in that and column is where you are really calling down the spirit. Is how I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a while, and there was a woman in our church that would talk about that, calling down the spirit. This is where we get to do that in the and piece, right? And I am so strong. And I believe that as a body, we can be reconciled to each other. And I believe that I'm not the only one God is whispering to at night, right? So this is where we really allow ourselves to realign with that deep truth. And I'm telling you guys, taking some time to do this type of exercise before you walk into the brave conversation is a game changer. This is how you let go of your limiting beliefs about yourself, about the other person, and allow yourself to walk in believing that this person is a child of God just like you are. And that you are not meeting a monster. You're not meeting an enemy. You might be meeting someone that you disagree with. But this is how you invite hope into the situation. This is how you bring a brick, not a cathedral. This next slide is something that gets said a lot in improv. Bring a brick, not a cathedral. What that means is that when you're initiating a scene, you offer one thing. You don't come in with a whole screenplay. You come in with one thing. And then you listen. And your scene partner brings something. And maybe someone else comes in and brings something. You build whatever it's going to be together. You bring a brick, not a cathedral. And if there is just anything that I hope you guys take away from this webinar about building a brave conversation using mindful improv thinking, it's this right here. It's this idea that you don't need to know 11 steps down the road how it plays out. So I don't know how often isn't it funny how people, when they're leading this type of thing, it's like they get this voice of authority so often based on me having done research of every person in the world. I know that this is so often what happens. Now, in my anecdotal experience, it's easy to procrastinate around brave conversations if I feel like, well, I haven't done enough research and I procrastinate a plan, we don't need to do all that. It's okay for your brick to literally be, this made me uncomfortable. I don't want to feel uncomfortable around you. Can we talk about this? That's a good enough brick. It's okay for your brick to literally be a physical manifestation of your discomfort. I shared an email with the Mindful Improv community a few weeks ago called The Value of Baby Bricks, wherein I was at a church service and I was middle school age. And somebody stood up at the end of the service and had the microphone and said, I am so thankful to be a part of this denomination. And I won't throw that denomination under the bus right now, but I'm so thankful to be a part of this denomination. I feel like we do everything right. We believe all the right things. And I'm so glad I can be a part of this congregation and this denomination. And as a kid, I had such a clear memory for the first time of, first of all, thinking, oh, great. Like, what a relief. I'm so glad. I guess I'm really glad to be a part of it too, then. If we're doing all the right stuff, I mean, great. That's a huge relief to know. And then I see a woman 2 rows in front of me go like this to her husband. Like literally her eyebrows, her whole face, her butt cheeks clenched together, her just like physically her whole body was like, I disagree and I am uncomfortable. And that was a beautiful learning moment for me as a child. Because what I realized is there is some things that are believed by people in my church that make other people butt clench really hard. And like it was just like, oh, adults don't all believe the same thing. That woman's allowing of herself to just have a reaction and to not in her head think, oh, I better not, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I better just stifle my reaction so I don't hurt anyone's feelings. She taught me so much. She didn't even need to pull me aside later and be like, hey, I feel weird about the fact that this got said in the room in front of children. And it would have been fine if she had done that. That's life is improv. Life is improv. It would have been fine if she had. But my point is, don't undervalue a simple brick. Don't undervalue that your honesty matters and has a ripple effect. Your honesty does more than you realize, because it's like a loaves and fishes thing, you guys. I love getting to say this stuff. In my HR corporate world, I don't get to say all this, but talking to fellow believers, like this is trust the loaves and fishes dynamic of your simple bricks. They are used for kingdom building. I promise you. Be brave. Offer your simple brick. You don't need to have the whole cathedral. In fact, it's better when you don't, because your scene partner can't surprise you if you don't give them the opportunity. Okay. So I wanted to say those things. So here are the core 5. This is mindful improv thinking concepts for brave conversations. I've shared a lot of the heart behind these, but I want you to hear these specific skills because it'll be easier for you to use them. You're probably already doing them. You probably already are. But when you know the name of them and you can identify them, then you can draw upon them more readily in a brave conversation when you need them. So these are improv skills that we are using to make scenes work on stage that you can use off stage, specifically in brave conversations. The first is choose curiosity over judgment. It's not going to be your first instinct, and that's okay. I've become fond of saying curiosity second. Let's give ourselves some grace. We're going to be judgmental. We're passionate people. We believe strongly in the things we believe about. And you know what? Great. That's okay. That's great. Curiosity second. Honor your scene partner. You heard me say this earlier. In improv, the ask is to trust that the audience isn't our job. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because they've paid money and we can only have jobs if they keep paying money to come see us perform. The theater is a business. They need people to buy tickets. They need people to tell their friends and leave reviews. And so it's real easy to get thinky about that and to start forgetting that your only job is your scene partner. Your job is to sacrificially support your scene partner and to trust that all the other objectives, and those objectives matter, they are important. But the ask of improv is to trust that those objectives will be met, and they will be met better when we prioritize each other. And so who is the audience? The audience is anyone not involved with this brave conversation, right? Sometimes the other people in your congregation are the audience. Sometimes one person brought up to me about conflict between staff members. Well, guess what? In that situation, you and that other staff member, you guys are scene partners to each other. What everybody else thinks about how you're handling it, that's the audience. The audience changes. These are dynamic concepts. It changes based on each brave conversation. Who you are engaged with in this moment, that is your scene partner, and that person is your priority. Number 3, stay present in this moment. Don't get pulled backwards into, well, I've heard exactly this kind of thing before. You see someone has a yard sign in their yard and now we know all the yard sign havers are the same. Nope, that's actually not the truth. That's not how it works. Whatever has happened in the past, leave it there. Leave it there. We learn from it. We accept it. There is no erasure. There is no erasure. This is the gorgeous part of that yes and building that we talked about earlier. We accept everything that has happened already and we build on top of it. We deeply understand as improvisers that we can't build without accepting what is already, without acknowledging and accepting what is already. And also, we're not limited by it. If a joke didn't land before, we don't just decide, well, I guess it's a bad show. It's new in this moment. It's new in this moment. It's new in this moment. Don't miss the new. Don't get so caught up. Even if you can justifiably say, I share in my book that I was sexually abused as a child in my church and then raised in that same church and entrenched in purity culture and taught all this stuff in the same place where my purity was stolen from me, I believed. It is not to say that I just don't care about that anymore. It's not to say that, oh, it's in the past, it doesn't matter. But it is to say that I still get to have a beautiful life. It is to say that I don't have to be robbed of a faith that's important to me because of this thing that happened. It's about agency. It's about that in this moment, I have a new opportunity to live the kind of life that I want to live. So it's about, not necessarily being burdened by the past, but it's also not being burdened by the future. And this is something that can easily happen in improv, is like you start getting planny about like, oh, what if these characters could come together? What if this could happen? Oh, it'd be great is if we brought back the baseball bat. What we need is that electric porcupine character again. And it's fine. It's not that it's bad. It's just that your opportunity to build something that you're proud of is happening right now. And every second that you spend not mentally present in the right now is a second that you are investing not in the relationship. Like if you want to build something great with your scene partner, you have to be present right now. Okay. Listen beyond your reaction. That's a tough one. One of the things that can happen often in improv is that because it's all made up and because we need to make brave choices, we need to make bold choices. It's really boring improv if everyone's scared of saying the wrong thing. And so everyone is slow to get out there and only pitches their most vanilla ideas and whatever. That's how you build a really boring show. So in improv, we're asked to not be careful with each other. Isn't this so dangerous sounding? We're asked to be brave, to make bold choices. That's what they say over and over. Make bold choices. And the reason it works is that we're also taught to assume the best of intentions. We're also taught that we can hash stuff out after the show. It's not just that whatever happens on there, if we didn't like it or we were uncomfortable, that we just have to deal with it. Absolutely not. Nope, that's not at all the case. It just is the case that we understand it's better to know how strong we are. It's better to know how resilient we are than to just never put bold ideas out there. If we want to build something that we're proud of, we have to create an environment where it's safe enough for people to make bold choices. And how we do that is by each of us deciding that we can listen beyond our initial reaction. If we don't like someone's suggestion, we don't have to let the scene develop into something that is sexist or racist or what we don't like. An initial offering can be imperfect and can get built and blossom into something that does honor us. But what creates not that is when we hear something we don't like, and then we're like, ugh, I guess that person, I'm not going to participate in that. So I'm just going to let that person have the floor. Really? That's not going to build what we want to build. So there's this really beautiful agency in improv when we remember, guys, please hear this. It's improv. If you start feeling like, uh-oh, I don't like where this is headed, good thing it's not a script. Good thing it's not written in stone. We can pivot still. In fact, the onus is on each of us. Guys, I'm getting all fired up. I'm feeling the Holy Ghost right now. Like the onus is on each of us to build something that we're proud of, So we get in there and we don't surrender to something that doesn't even honor that person. We don't just say, well, I guess that's what's happening now. We listen beyond that reaction so that we can have that next creative impulse of how to shape and shift something in a direction that does honor us. So we hang in there. We have some resilience. We allow our creative abilities to have a little bit of perseverance. We don't just check out immediately when we're uncomfortable. And then this last piece, give and receive everything as a gift. Gift orientation is a really critical piece of improv. Because basically what we're saying is we don't just run out there on stage because we feel like we haven't been out there for a while and we want, the coach or the producer to believe that we're worth our spot on the team. We don't just get out there because we want to prove something to the audience or whatever provey stuff is happening in our heads, whatever insecurity causes us to sometimes participate in a conversation that we don't need to be in. Like, we don't do all that. The question you're always asking is not, do I have something to contribute? The question is my contribution helpful to the scene? Is this a gift to the scene? If it is, get out there. Ignore the voice in your head that says you've been out there too much. Ignore the voice in your head that says, what if I try and I get it wrong? Feel the fear and do it anyway. We have this really lovely saying that is painted on a lot of walls in a lot of improv theaters: follow the fear. And I love it so much. I have a t-shirt that says it. So the idea is you give it as a gift, and so what that means for Brave Conversations is that, you're not all apologetic about it. You don't apologize when you give someone a gift. You're not like, I'm so sorry to have to bring this to your attention, but what you said was really hurtful. I'm so sorry. I know you're so busy. I'm so sorry. That's not what you do when you give someone a gift, but you also don't chuck it at their face, right? Like, when something is a gift, that changes the way that it's presented. And that also changes the way that it's received, you guys. So we offer our contributions as a gift. When you're on the receiving end, not everyone has had the benefit of these gorgeous mindful improv trainings, right? Not everyone's had the benefit. So sometimes you're going to get a gift chucked at your face, right? That doesn't feel good to anyone, myself included. People often ask me, well, what do you do when someone else doesn't have this training? And I think it's sort of a funny question because that's all of my Brave Conversations in my life. I, like you guys, am surrounded by other people that don't think about it this way, And so, of course, in my life, I am regularly affronted, in this way. But guess what? I'm not made out of glass. I am so capable of not missing the gift because of the presentation. Please hear that. Please hear that. Don't miss the gift because of the wrapping paper. There is a gift of clarity. There is a gift of understanding what might be the question that could help me find a path forward here. What's the next question to ask? What boundary is needed? What new rule is needed? There is clarity. There is new information. Every utterance from your scene partner is a gift. You have the ability of receiving it as a gift. Not every gift feels like the most fun ever, Sometimes what you wanted was, a diamond tennis bracelet, and what you got was additional sticks of RAM for your computer. Ask me if that's a real example. Sometimes, you have this idea of what you want, and what you get is something else, but it's something that you really, really need, That is going to be a thing that is happening in our churches more and more often as we step into another election year that is just as, if not more contentious as past election years, if you can even believe it. It's just going to happen. We are not going to agree. I thought for sure that as I started talking with pastors, I was going to be finding some red churches and some blue churches. And what I have found is purple church, purple church, purple church, purple church, purple church. We just don't agree. There is not one way to be a believer. And so we have got to realize that our conversations with one another, it is possible for us to be humble learners. That's the prayer that I pray so often for you guys. Before this webinar happened, I was praying for you guys' churches and your ministries. And the prayer that I keep coming back to is for every congregant in your church, that we could learn to be humble, that we could be humble learners, that we could be curious about each other instead of so sure that we've met an enemy. We decide someone's an enemy when we see that their behavior is hurtful. But I am sitting here as someone who has been hurtful in my life and needed to be reconciled into the body, needed to have it brought to my attention the way that my behavior could be more in alignment with the love that truly was in my heart. How could I not want to pass that on? How could I not want to pay that forward? And so the spirit of Brave Church is that. The spirit of Brave Church is that every person who calls himself a believer can be a person of love more consistently. I believe that we can do that for each other. And I think that the church could set the example for what it looks like to disagree, to be angry, but not sin. I think the church could set the example for what it's like to have these brave conversations with each other in a way that's like, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? This is what I heard. What do you think? Can we find a way to be humble learners and courageous teachers? Can we find a way to do that? I think we can. So the spirit of Brave Church, actually, let me just check in. Let me not skip over that slide. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts about everything you've just heard? Okay.
No,
I needed that water. I need another one too. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I really appreciate this, and I don't particularly have a question, but I feel like I'm with you. I'm listening and taking it in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate those words of affirmation. Okay, well, if you think of a question later, feel free to shoot me an email or anything like that. But what I do want to do is share a little bit about the Brave Church program, which I'm hoping you guys know at least a little bit about. But what it is I've essentially taken the content that I've been sharing. I have been teaching these ideas to corporate leaders, HR departments, pretty much anywhere folks will listen to me, just trying to spread the good news of brave conversations for building, maintaining, and restoring trust. That's my whole thing. We got to build the trust, maintain it, and restore it. Truly in alignment with that trans-theoretical model that I talked about before of just understanding how behavior change works. Relapse is a part of that process. It is included in the process. It has its own field because the social scientists that developed this model understand that we do not change without messing up. That's just not how people ever change their behavior ever. Relapse is a part of the process. And so the idea around Brave Church is just the spirit of resilience, the spirit of understanding that we're going to hurt each other. We're going to get these ideas of how we can do better and we're going to get it wrong. But it's so important. It's so important for us to get back on the horse and try again anyway, and it's this understanding that we got to rebuild again. So it's we build, we maintain, and we rebuild trust. And it's also about the spirit of healthy unity. One of the pieces of pushback that I heard early on when I first started shopping this program around to churches was this word unity has been hurtful to some people who have been told, yeah, we can be one body if you don't be who you really are. If you just kind of keep your mouth shut and, don't be who you really are, then you can belong. That's not the type of unity that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about healthy unity, where we acknowledge that complete agreement and uniformity of thinking on every issue does not exist, and it never has. It never has existed in the church or anywhere, but this healthy unity where we honor one another and focus our efforts on serving in love, But the only way to do that is if we're not living with a ton of resentment and suspicion of one another. And so my goal for Brave Church is for pastors and church leaders, firstly. That's who this program will be open to, is pastors and church leaders. For them to learn these concepts of this is how we give difficult feedback. This is how we receive difficult feedback. This is how we hold each other accountable, whether that's other staff members, whether that's somebody in the church. But then the larger purpose, I'm building the workbook now of the exercises and the handouts and stuff that can then be passed on to congregants. And my goal is for pastors and church leaders, or however it makes the most sense in each individual church, to then pass this information on to congregants. This is how we will confront each other. This is how we will do it. This is how we will make it through this next election year and stay focused on being people of love and serving in love and speaking up. To the ones of you who hopped on earlier, I want to just provide the context that the scripture verse that I opened us up with is Ephesians 4:25-26, and it talks about putting away falsehood and speaking truthfully to one another, and how I really believe that this is not just about whether or not we're honest about who broke the vase, as I used to think of it when I was a kid, but about being willing to truthfully say when we're angry, or truthfully say when we're hurt, or when we don't agree. We don't need to bear falsehood and pretend to agree when we don't in order to belong. That's not real unity. We can be who we really are. We can be who we really are. So that's the spirit of Brave Church. And this is just an outline. It's a 5-week program. This is an outline of what we'll cover in each week. Week 1 is the basics, where I'm going to be providing some of what we've talked about here today, but like tactics. How do we navigate these brave conversations on both macro and micro dialogue? Meaning sometimes we have group discussions. I think sometimes we have group discussions when we don't need to have those group discussions, and it can truly be more of a one-to-one thing. But we'll talk about, how do we know when's the best method? Like, how do we know when to do that? And then how can we use these ideas of mindful improv thinking in order to have productive conversations? Week 2 is all about forgiveness. I teach that forgiveness first approach. So I'll be teaching the proactive forgiveness process, and then again, equipping folks to teach that to others. Week 3 is about curiosity. And there's a couple exercises I'm so excited to share. One is this beliefs versus values exercise that is so helpful for you to get curious about yourself. But then it's a great conversation starter, and it's great in groups, and it's great one-to-one. My husband and I have done this exercise together, and we found a beautiful path forward on an area where we have always disagreed and not understood each other. And it was a powerful tool for us. And it was like at a restaurant. This is my whole thing, is that we view confrontation as this big, scary thing. And sometimes it can literally just happen like whenever it needs to. We give ourselves so much freedom when we embrace that life is improv. It doesn't have to be a big planned thing. It can be like, here's my truth. What do you think? And we go from there. So that beliefs versus values exercise is super, super helpful and super actionable. And then also the confrontational archetypes, which is an exploration guide that I built based on tendencies that we have when we're out of alignment. And these confrontational tendencies that I'm not even gonna say don't always, they do not help us to honor our scene partners and honor what we believe. So I'll be sharing that as a curiosity exercise for people to know themselves more and how they operate in brave conversations. Week 4 is all about giving difficult feedback. And there's 3 primary ways that we do that. So we'll talk about how to choose the appropriate method and how to make sure that we stay true to that throughout the conversation. And week 5 is all about maintaining trust. Like, after the brave conversation happens, it's obviously not just fixed forever, right? We have to follow up. We have to follow through. And then this is also where we'll get into those basics of motivational interviewing, like I told you guys before. And that is not my own content. That is developed by social scientists by the names of Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick. And they have graciously allowed this to be open source content because they want as many people to learn it as possible. And I have been trained multiple times by some of the best teachers in the country on this framework in my social work days. And I am very delighted to share this with people in the church because I think it's so important. So this will be all about, how do you ask questions to help someone find their own motivation toward change? Okay, so that's sort of a program outline. It will happen live. Each week will be live, and there will be a recording that can be shared if you have to miss. Starts in September, all of them Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Just keep things simple. And then costs, before enrollment, I'm doing like an early bird type of thing. So before August 31st, it will be $450. After August 31st, $500. And then you can see down there that if you're enrolling multiple people from your church, that there would be a discount for enrolling 4 or more. And always there will be, regardless of the date of enrollment, a pay what you're able option, because I really want for cost not to be the reason why a church doesn't participate in this, because now's the time. We're here for such a time as this, you guys. I really believe that we can make a difference in our local communities. I am under no false illusions, as I have talked with several pastors at length at this point. I understand that macro level in our country, there is some brokenness in the church and some hurt in the church. But that doesn't mean we need to give up on what our individual communities feel like and what our church feels like and what our families feel like. I believe that there is so much hope, so much hope. And I deeply believe that brave conversations are how we get there. So with all of that in mind, I just want to open it up again if there's any questions. Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you guys for being here. If you have any other questions, feel free to send me an email, or if anything comes up. Yeah. All right. See ya.
Yep. Thank you.